Good question. Will the future of work make us happy? I try to answer this with 15 new work master skills for individual, corporate, and social improvement. Bullshit title, but yeah, that's the way I do it. Since May 1st, 2017, which is Labor Day, or which was Labor Day in Germany, my friend Christoph and I have been talking to the most diverse people about the future of work in our podcast, On the Way to New Work. New work? The term new work is actually only used in Germany, and the range of interpretations could not be wider. While some understand it to mean post-its on the wall, colorful sofas, no meetings after 5 p.m. and dogs in the office, for others it is an utopia and a completely new understanding of what work actually is or should be. This is Fridtjof Bergmann. Or I have to say this was Fridtjof Bergmann, the founder of the New Work movement. He was a philosophist, and already in the 1980s, he talked about how work should be so that it strengthens people and does not weaken them. We met this wonderful, visionary, and funny man at the age of 89 for our podcast episode 100 in Ann Arbor, in a hospital in Michigan. Since then, he accompanied our work very, very closely. And we dedicated our book to him, which we just released on March 30th. And very, very sadly, he passed away peacefully before our book was published. This man really was a genius. But coming back to my question, will the future of work make us happy? Or should I ask, how will the future of work make us happy? I think starting with oneself, starting with myself, could be a good idea. Seen from the outside, I have had a very successful professional life so far. After working as a management consultant, an agency manager, and the youngest global CMO for Audi in history of this brand, I have now been an entrepreneur for almost 18 years. Sounds nice, but the true story is that the agency group called Think, which I co-founded, which employs more than 400 people right now, is successful. 5 years after our start, we have been voted Global Newcomer Agency of the Year, and even after that, the agency was successful. But 5.5 years ago, we realized that we are very dysfunctional as a leadership team. And if you have a look at this picture, you see 3 people smiling, and one is... It was a shock to me that they said to me, Michael, we believe we could run the agency without you in a better way. It was a shock to me because my founding partner, who left the agency about 9 years ago, told me the same story. And I asked myself the question, what is why you failed to make a partnership a lasting success 2 times in a row? I realized for myself that I took a huge part in the fact that our partnership didn't go perfectly, because I have seen myself as a victim of circumstances far too often, and I wanted to change that. Or as a journalist quoted me, I got it right in the face. So my second learning, or what I call now master skill, is try to find your blind spots. In my case, it was a lack of mindfulness, a lack of commitment, a poor conflict management. I think I married the 2 weak conflict management strategies of my mother and my father. A weak ability for genuine joy, so I was counting my likes on Instagram instead of starting to play the piano, what I promised for 30 years. Procrastination, I wanted to be everybody's darling. I'm easily distracted, and worst thing, I'm easily offended. In German, beleidigt. I wanted how I wanted to work in future, and I was concerned with what I'm really good at and what I would really love to do. And tests like Penn State University's character strength test, costs nothing, helped me with this. And I can say today that starting with my blind spot and then focusing on my strengths was the starting point into a new, even happier phase of my professional life, where I now have the opportunity to speak to you about the lessons I've learned. In the following, I would like to move a bit away from my own story, because it's not about me, it's about all of us. Almost all experts agree that the changes in the world we are facing, in the world of work, will demand even more of us physically and mentally than before. And the correct handling of our own physical and mental resources is therefore also one of the master skills that can help us on our way to new work or to the future of work. I'm talking about how we eat, how we exercise, and how we sleep. You may ask, sleep? Yes. Sleep is the greatest or has the greatest impact on our health. Matthew Walker is the leading researcher on sleep in the world. And he said, we will come to learn that sleep is the universal healthcare provider. Whatever the physical or mental alignment, sleep has a prescription it can dispense. So what does this mean? In his book, Matthew Walker uses tons of studies to demonstrate the special importance that sleep has in our life. It clearly shows that it is a myth whenever people say or even brag about needing only 4 hours of sleep. Former top politicians like Ronald Reagan or Maggie Thatcher, the older among you may remember them, they said we just need 4 hours sleep. Both of them were diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. According to Walker, sleep has the negative and the positive power to influence the course of nearly all civilian diseases. I would love to come to a positive example. This is André Iguodala, the NBA Finals MVP of 2015. NBA is basketball. Among others, Matthew Walker worked with Andrew, and as you may know, NBA players play over 70 games per season, which offers significant data that they recorded. And the performance that Iguodala had in games after he slept more than 8 hours differed dramatically from those where he slept for less than 8 hours. There are already companies in the US that recognize that employees who got enough sleep are a win, and the consequence, they pay them more when they can prove it with any kind of watch or whatever. Like Aetna, a US-based insurance company. Master skill number 5, train good habits. Practicing good habits is also a part of our new work master skills because they can help to train and anchor the necessary changes in our behavior. 43% of all what we're doing are habits. Better make sure that it's more good than bad habits. And what is the difference? Why is it so difficult to fall into bad habits and so easy to fall into bad habits and so difficult to train good habits? Whenever we adopt bad habits, we are rewarded first and the negative consequences come later. Watching Netflix all night and eating pizza, it's fun in the beginning, but it's not the best concept for life. With a good habit, it's often the other way around. It's not fun of all at the beginning, and the successes are only visible later. Running around the Ulster every morning, even in wintertime, it hurts. But if you do so for 1 or 2 or 3 years, you will get rewarded. And the interesting thing is that just 1% better per day has impact on your life, could have impact on your life. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, explains the power that can lie in small but regular changes with the help of his 1% rule. What do you think if you get 1% better a day over the course of 1 year? How much better you are if you get better 1% per day? Where are the techies, the mathematics among you? Just one, tell me one number.
In 80 days, you get twice better.
Twice better? Maybe. But after 1 year, you get 37 times better. 1% a day is 37 times better after 1 year. Try it with your calculator. The bad thing is, a daily decrease of 1% means that after 1 year, we arrive at 3% of our starting value. Master skill number 6, manage yourself. I will briefly come back to my own learning journey. As you remember, a lack of commitment and the tendency to postpone things, called procrastination, were among my blind spot. And that's probably the reason why I was so much looking forward to our anniversary guest on our podcast. In episode 200, we had David Allen as our guest. He is known as the godfather of self-management. And he said in our podcast the following: most people feel best about their work the week before their vacation. But it's not because of the vacation itself. What do you do the last week before you leave on a big trip? You clean up, close up, clarify, and renegotiate all your agreements with yourself and others. I just suggest that you do this weekly instead of yearly. David has incorporated more than 20 years of experience into this method, sold more than 2 million of his books. And the main thing he said, clear your head. The head is a good place to get ideas, but a bad place to keep them there. And unimagined productivity leaps can be achieved by bundling all the tasks that you want to do in one input channel, then planning them in a context-related manner, and then regularly dealing with both processing and organization. We don't have the time to explain the method, and there are other methods out there, but if you are similar to me, you should focus on this thing. I would really like to encourage all of you who feel they need to take action on self-management not to give up. I'm training this since years, but I'm getting better in slow things, but it helps. This matrix helps to classify yourself for all 4 types, the GTD method and other methods offered starting points, tools, and other things to significantly improve your own productivity. So I always believed I'm a visionary. My colleagues believe he is a crazy maker. Tons of ideas, but no execution. So I have to try to get my things much more under control. Maybe you are in another field, maybe you're all captains and commander, but this is the place where you want to be. What can you do if you have more time for doing good work? You then could go for deep work. What is deep work? Another bullshit bingo word. Just as significant is the area in which knowledge workers need to improve the ability to work focused and distraction-free on important topics. It was a computer science professor, his name is Cal Newport, who invented this system. And why did he do so? According to a 2012 McKinsey study, I'm talking about 10 years ago, the normal knowledge worker spends 60% of the work week on electronic communication and searching the internet. Almost 30% of this time alone is spent reading and writing emails, and there was no Slack or WhatsApp or whatever, and no TikTok. The truth is, email distractions make bosses worse leaders. And it's not only that managers are not managing, but they're also focusing on smaller tasks for the sake of feeling productive. I had so much emails, I'm so productive, and they are doing things they are not paid for. One of our guests was the HR director of Harry's, a shaver brand from the US, and she told us a quote from her CEO and founder, Andy Katz-Mayfield. He said, "Your email inbox is a to-do list that someone else put together for you." And when I heard this the first time, I said, yeah, I'm sitting there in the morning and to start to answer emails. Then I have a meeting, and then I'm coming back to my MacBook and I'm answering emails. And I think once you realized this, you feel that you are in deep, deep shit. Deep work, what is this? It's professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to the limit. And these efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. I know some of you are techies, others are designers. These 2 groups are very good. Someone who's coding is trained to do coding hours and hours. Someone who is a good designer is trained to do so. But people who are working in management-related areas will understand what I'm talking about. There are good examples in Germany. A company called Voigt, it's a German engineering group, I think almost 170 years old. They recognized the topic and introduced so-called deep work hours. In this period of time, 1.5 hours every day, there are no meetings, there's no internet access, and no phone calls for 1.5 hours a day. And during this time, the employees are required to work exclusively on concept or creative work. Learn to listen. Ooh. For me, our podcast was the way to become a better listener. This became evident to me when I learned more about a person in just 1 hour during one of our first podcast conversations, where I talked to a long-time friend and companion than in the years before. in 1 hour more than in 10 years. I realized that I had a problem, or to put it positively, it opened up a great opportunity. Whenever you feel the urge to interrupt a colleague in a meeting, please just remember this one quote. There's a difference between listening and waiting for your turn to speak. And we all learned this in school. You remember? We have to show up. And once we show up, we're not concentrated anymore. We're not listening to anything. And that's the same thing we're doing when we're working together with people, or many do so. The good thing is there are so many ways to practice it. And it's the only way to learn something new in a conversation. Why? Because we already know what we want to say. If we don't listen, we have no chance to learn something new. Master skill number 9, trust your team. In his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Patrick Lencioni sums it up. The absence of trust is often the first dysfunction in teams. If it is not right here, a chain reaction can set in that leads us to an inattention to results. There's a very interesting study done by the legendary Google People's Analytics team together with Harvard professor Amy Edmondson. They found out what makes teams successful. And guess what is the most important factor if a team is successful? Who has an idea? Trust, yeah. It's a little bit more complicated, but it is related to trust. It's called psychological safety. What does it mean? It means every team member is allowed to make mistakes, to criticize, and to point out problems. It does not mean holding your hands and being nice all the time. It is just, therefore, absolutely the feeling I can point on problems, not on people, but on problems, and nobody will criticize me for talking like this. The other factors you may understand easier. But I think this is something which was new for me. And we talked to Amy in our podcast, and she told us how she found out that this is this critical factor as a PhD candidate at Harvard 30 years ago. She was part of a larger group of researchers working on the relatively frequency, called incidence, of medication errors in hospitals. So her thesis was better teams have lower error rates, which seems to be logical. And the first look at her data showed the strong correlation she wanted. But the problem, the correlation was in the wrong way, the wrong direction. That was shocking for her. Good teams make more mistakes. She had another look. No, but they make them visible. They talk about them and they learn from them. And that was the birth of this psychological safety topic in teams. And she told us in the podcast, psychological safety isn't about being nice. It's good to be nice as well, but it's not the topic for psychological safety. It's about giving candid feedback, openly admitting mistakes, and learning from each other. And another guest in our podcast called Stephen M. R. Covey said, the ability to establish, grow, extend, and restore trust with all stakeholders, customers, business partners, investors, and co-workers is the key leadership competency of the new global economy. Yes, you're right, trust and psychological safety is very close. There's another learning or master skill, which maybe is shocking for you. Give more than you take. What does this mean? People tend to have one of 3 styles of interaction. There are takers who are always trying to serve themselves. You know these people. There are matchers who are always trying to get equal benefit for themselves and others. And there are givers who are always trying to help people. And the interesting thing is to see how successful in life the 3 types described by Adam Grant are. In his observation, and he did this with big data, matchers can be found at all levels of success. You can also meet takers at all levels. But successes of these people are often temporary, which means that takers then have to change their environment because nobody wants to work with takers. And now comes the interesting part of the story. Givers are among the most unsuccessful people, especially when they give without limits. But according to Grant, there is a disproportionately high number of givers among the most successful people. What is the difference between an unsuccessful and a successful giver? So try to imagine a situation. Someone asks you for a career advice. The unsuccessful giver would probably will do the job for you, will Google things for you, it will take her or him one day to help you or even more. And the successful giver gives you the 5-minute advice, says, well, I know this guy, I know this source in the internet, but he will or she will try to manage to protect herself. And that's the reason why she could give much more than someone who is giving too much at one person. There's an interesting page at Adam Grant's homepage where you can do a give and take assessment and you can find out whether you are a giver or a matcher. I don't believe that any takers are here in the room. I think it's not the right type of conference. Master skill 11, connect with people. One of the most fascinating guys in our podcast was Robert Waldinger, also a professor, but at Harvard Medical School. He's a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, difficult words, and a Zen priest. And he directs the oldest study of happiness, health, and longevity. He's already the 4th director of the study of adult development. And since 1938, that was the year where my father was born, he died 2 years ago, he and his team and their predecessors have been studying the lives of 724 men, not very diverse, I have to say, some of whom were Harvard students, and the others children from one of the poorest neighborhoods in Boston. And in a TED Talk, I think it was one of the top 10 TED Talks, a few years ago, he shared his study with the world, and he shared it with our podcast listeners as well. What do you think is the single factor which describes why people are happy, healthy, and why they live long? Yeah, that is so close. It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community are happier. They're physically healthier and they live longer than people who are less well connected. And it's so obvious, but do we behave like this? I don't know if everyone really behaves like this. Master skill number 12, lead to serve. So the term servant leadership is a bit older. I think it's back in the 80s of the last century as well. But according to my observations, it's just making a comeback. And the inventor of the servant leadership style was Robert Greenleaf. And he said the servant leader is servant first. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first, as opposed to wanting power, influence, fame, or wealth. And if you compare the traditional with the servant leader, the traditional leader wants to rank a title, and the servant leader sees leadership as an opportunity to serve others. The traditional leader uses power and control to drive performance. The servant leader shares power and control to drive engagement. Traditional leaders measure success through output, and servant leaders measure success through growth and development. Traditional leaders speak more than they listen, and servant leaders listen. The traditional leader believes it's about them, and the servant leader understands it's not about them. Master skill number 13, embrace diversity. Diversity wins, period. This has been proven time and again in studies, whether it's gender, ethnic origin, different age groups, even white old men will have their role, different talents or educational backgrounds. Yes, it's so much easier at the beginning when everyone in a team is similar. But if you put in effort, we get better results in mixed teams. But it doesn't stop at diversity. And Katharina Berg, Chief Human Resources Officer at Spotify, says it like this: Spotify defines diversity as being invited to the party, inclusion as being asked to dance, and belonging as when they play your song. Master skill number 14, find your purpose. I'm so sorry to have so many bullshit bingo words for you, but I believe in purpose. It was invented by Greek philosophers more than 2,000 years ago, but it feels like 10 years the topic of purpose has played a major role when it comes to finding individual meaning or right to exist as an organization. Simon Sinek made an important contribution to this with his golden circle. In his TED Talk and his book Start With Why, he explains why leaders, brands, and companies that manage to formulate their why are more successful than leaders, brands, and companies that only can say what they do and how they do it. We're talking about a better brand valuation for companies with a purpose. We're talking about consumers, that they would buy rather products from a purpose-driven company. 9 out of 10 employees would take a pay cut to have more purpose in their work. And the most crazy number is for every 10% increase of purposefulness, however it is measured, at work, organizations experience 8.1% reduced turnover. I have one example for you. This is a company called Blackboat. It's the company of my podcast partner, Christoph. And among other things, Blackboat advises companies on their way to the cloud. I have to tell them that cloud business is a bad business, much better than aviation. I learned it today. No, just kidding. But first and foremost, he implements communication tools that should make work more modern. And on a trip to New York together, he asked me to help him find his purpose for his company. And my idea was to do a workshop where we alternately sat in coffees and went for a walk. And the word that defines Christoph is freedom. And you can decide whether it is a coincidence that we ended up right here on our way through New York. At that time, I said to him, Christoph, stand still, and I took this picture. And I said to Christoph, I found your why, or we found your why. You love your freedom more than anything else. And you free people, understand as an imperative, describes exactly what you do. First with yourself, then with your team, and then again and again with your customers. 5 minutes later, the world knew via Instagram. And the purpose of the company now is free people from the old way of working by leveraging future technologies. That brings me to the most important topic, and I'm so happy and thankful that I had the chance to listen to Bastian. Topic number 15, and master skill number 15, I should take it on the beginning of the presentation, heal the world. This may sound cheesy now, but that's what it's all about. And maybe you remember the old guy, Fridtjof Bergmann, who invented the new work phrase. He recognized what he called the 4 tsunamis 40 years ago. The divide between incredible wealth and terrible poverty, the waste of our natural resources, the destruction of our climate, and the destruction of our culture. So let's talk less and do more. The United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals shows us the way. Are you already on your way? Then keep it up. Coming back to the beginning and my story, as I told you, I failed as a manager. Where am I myself today? So I found my purpose, and my purpose now is inspiring and encouraging people to step out of their comfort zone and to help them to grow and never stop doing so. I do this together with a wonderful partner, my co-founder Svantje. She's our CEO as well, and we founded a company called New Work Master Skills a year and a half ago. And we're offering consulting, training, and coaching to help bring more happiness to the future of work. In the summary, if we manage to get better me's and then better we's, we will be a better society. And the question of all questions, will the future of work make us happy? And yeah, it's cheesy again. I end up with Steve Jobs. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it, keep looking, don't settle. And as you always said, one more thing. As I learned, and this last chart I did it in the short break, if you will give my podcast a little chance, I would suggest listen to episode 321, which will come on June 1st. It's Rutger Bregman, the guy who was mentioned by Bastian. He is the positive version of Noel Harari. With his book, Im Grunde Gut, or Humankind, he shows the way that we have it in us. We have it in ourselves. We are meant to be good people and not Putins or minimes of Putin. Thank you very much.